All right, I'm going to take some time to go into some detail now about some stuff that we've been doing in the database that I just skimmed over before, but it's important you understand. Right, so our first foray into creating database records was the account record. And you'll remember that we made an account record using Passport. And all it had in it was a username and a password. Great. So we supplied these things from the registration form and an account was made in the database. But an important thing to remember is that the ID, the database, this is another thing that databases do, is they'll make an ID for you. So this ID is unique. The database makes sure it's unique and it writes this ID automatically into every record you create. And we made several records in the database collection for accounts. We made an A user, a B user, and a C user, you remember. Each had a username and password provided by us, and then an ID that the database created all on its own. So this is always unique, and the database always knows about this. It's important to remember because another thing we did when we next made our next database table, we made ourselves an event. These were events in our events collection. And we wrote in there, we gave every event a name, a timestamp for created, a timestamp for updated, if it ever gets updated. And we also put an owner. That's important in a minute. And when we did that, for every record that we did, the database made sure that this record had a unique ID. Okay? When we created this, you might not remember, but I skimmed over it at the time. We wrote into every events record an owner. Every time we made a new record in the events table, we made the owner the ID of the logged in user. So this ID was written straight into this table. So by joining tables together like this, you can now obviously do some more useful things. You can say that, let's say we wanted to get back from the database all of the records or all of the events owned by this owner. Well, we just supply the ID of that account, and we could retrieve all of the events here that owner that person owns. What we're going to do now is we're going to do that a little bit more, and we're going to do it more detail. I'm going to show you how it's done this time instead of just skimming over it like I did before. We're going to create a records table or a records collection, and we're going to say that the part of it is how many centimeters is the record. So how far did I jump? Who is the owner of the record? And what event did I jump in? And then when we do that for every record, we're going to get an ID made in the records table, ID. Great. And every time we do this, every time we make a new record, we're going to record here how far it was. Say they jump 150 centimeters, but we're going to write the ID of the account into the owner field here. And we're going to write the ID of the event here into the event field in this database, so that we can now, it should ring true to you like it did before, this is much more useful, we can now get collections at any one time of, say, the records held by this jumper, the person who owns the record, and the event that they were jumping in. So let's say we wanted to say we've got a jumper named Sally, and we wanted to see, let's see all of Sally's records for the long jump event. Well, we could do that by retrieving from the records table all of the records that have her unique ID and for the event that has the unique ID for the long jump. So we're going to see how that's done now. And go into some detail as we do. I'm going to slowly go through it instead of ripping through it like I did before.